Hey guys, welcome back. For tutorial 2, we're going to be covering first painting lips, and then moving on to painting skin and combining everything we've learned so far to complete a full realistic face painting. Once again, we'll be using our blocking in, blending, and rendering method with a few new techniques to help quicken your workflow. While you paint, you'll definitely want to keep your light source in mind. For this, our light source will be overhead, just above our model, so the shadows will be dropping downward. Now it's time for something new. I call this scattering the palette. Essentially, we're just directly applying the colors from our palette at 100% opacity right onto our painting where we think they should end up. We'll use this as a bit of a guide during our blending phase, and you can almost think of this as a paint by numbers type thing, just to simplify it a bit. Now, once that scattered palette is down, we go to town blending. To work quickly, just sample each color using Alt with your brush tool selected, and that'll give you immediate access to that eyedropper tool, which I will generally use constantly while I'm blending. Once we've got something that looks like remotely what we're aiming for, we can lower our brush size to start the rendering process. You may want to use a reference for this, just so you can see how light interacts with those wrinkles and folds on the surface of the lips. And that's pretty much all there is to it. Remember, if you're not familiar with painting lips, or if you feel stuck, one photo reference goes a long way. Moving on, let's shift our focus to skin. As usual, I've got a sketch layer and I've filled that with a solid color to paint over, and I've just slapped a makeshift background in behind that. Pulling up the palette, we'll get started with our blocking in phase. We're just going to time-lapse this for the sake of keeping this tutorial a reasonable length. Same exact process as we used on the lips basically. While blocking in, I'm going to use the scattered palette technique to place all my colors where I want them to end up. At this point, it's okay to be however messy you want. This is just to get an idea of the shadows and highlights and to quickly sample our colors while we blend. And don't forget, there's no one right way to paint. This is just one method, so if you're not fond of the scattered palette, you can always build up your shadows and highlights with opacity as we did in the first tutorial. And as I've said, make sure you establish your light source even before you start blocking in, because that's really the only way to get the results you want. During this blending phase, you'll find it helpful to lower the opacity so you can create smoother gradients between each color transition. Alright, and now we'll time lapse again. Here we've continued blending with opacity and then rendered out some eyes and lips real quick. The skin has only been very slightly rendered at this point. Then we'll add a bit more pigment and continue blending. At this point, we're just going to add a bit of texture to the skin. Grab a speckled brush to create some faint freckles on the cheeks, and then we'll use that same brush to create some pore textures, with those layer blending modes set to overlay. Finally, we can add a noise layer for some grain effect on the skin. This is one of those super quick and incredibly useful Photoshop tricks. Fill a layer with a gray tone, and under filters, select add noise. Just desaturate that, add a little bit of contrast, and then set the layer to overlay at about 10%. And that's a wrap for Tutorial 2. Thanks for watching, guys.